I should never have accepted that invitation. The black envelope, without a sender. Only my name printed in golden official letters. Inside, a simple card with the government seal and coordinates for a meeting. My curiosity has always been my worst flaw. Now, as I write these words, I don't know if I'm truly alone or if they are still watching me. I don't know if what I see is real or if my mind has already fragmented completely. All I know is that I need to record what I discovered before it's too late. Before I become completely something else. My name is Miguel Santos. Until 3 months ago, I was just a data scientist specializing in quantum cryptography at the Federal University. Respectable publications, a modest apartment, an ordinary life. Nothing in my history suggested I would be chosen for something so extraordinary and terrible. I had a girlfriend, Julia, plans for the future, mundane worries about mortgages and academic conferences. That normality now seems like a dream from another life. Then came the invitation, followed by a visit from 2 men in suits who didn't smile even once during our conversation. Their faces were perfectly symmetrical, almost artificially perfect. They spoke about national security, about a unique opportunity, about how my country needed me. They mentioned a classified project that required my specific skills. The word Area 51 was never spoken at that moment, but the confidentiality agreement I signed had more pages than my doctoral thesis. How long? I asked, thinking of Julia, of my commitments. 6 months, replied the taller of the two. Possibly less. They lied, of course. There were no plans for any of us to return. The flight to Nevada was on a military plane without windows. I remember the constant drone of the engines, the uncomfortable silence between the other 5 passengers, all scientists, as I'd later discover, and the growing feeling that I had made a mistake. The man beside me, a theoretical physicist named Nakamura, tried to start casual conversation, but he was silenced by one of the guards with a mere look. That was the first moment I felt genuine fear. Not because of what was said, but because of what could not be said. When we landed, we were transferred to a helicopter with tinted glass. Only when we descended, in the middle of the desert, could I see the complex. A series of hangars and low buildings that seemed insignificant in the arid vastness. The real facility, as I soon discovered, was beneath the surface. Kilometers beneath. Cold air conditioning was the first sensation upon entering the elevator that would take us down. An artificial cold that seemed to penetrate beyond the skin, into the bones. The elevator descended far too long, creating that uncomfortable pressure in our ears usually associated with altitude changes on airplanes. No one spoke during the descent, only the mechanical sound of the elevator and our collective breathing, increasingly tense. The first few days were filled with orientation, invasive medical exams, and endless security briefing sessions. I signed more documents, took secrecy, oaths, received subcutaneous tracking implants. Standard procedure, explained Dr. Elisa Chen, the lead scientist who would be my direct supervisor. She had intense eyes that never seemed to blink appropriately, and a smile that never reached those eyes. Her skin was too pale, as if she had never seen sunlight, and her hands moved with almost mechanical precision when handling equipment. "Your work here is vital, Dr. Santos," she said while guiding me through the sterilized corridors of Level 3. The smell of ozone and chemicals was constant, mixed with something more subtle I couldn't identify. Something organic and slightly metallic. "We are at the frontier of human knowledge." "What exactly is the nature of the project?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual as we passed through increasingly elaborate security doors. "Communication," she responded after a calculated pause. "We're trying to establish communication." "With whom?" Her smile widened unsettlingly. "Not who, Dr. Santos, and not exactly what either. It was on the 4th day that I saw the object for the first time. That's what everyone called it. The object, always with an almost religious reverence. It was contained in a reinforced glass chamber at the center of a circular laboratory. It looked like an irregular stone approximately 1 meter in diameter, with a surface that alternated between absolute black and an iridescent glow that seemed to move independently of the ambient lighting. But the most disturbing thing wasn't its appearance. It was the feeling it provoked. Even meters away, separated by glass and containment fields, I could feel a kind of pressure, as if something was constantly pushing against my consciousness. The room was kept at an extremely low temperature. Our breath formed small clouds in the air, and everyone wore special thermal coats except for Chen, who seemed completely indifferent to the cold. Around the object, a series of instruments continuously monitored radiation, magnetic fields, quantum fluctuations, and dozens of other parameters I didn't recognize. It emits patterns, explained Chen, her eyes fixed on the object with disturbing intensity. Sequences of data that challenge our understanding. Your job is to help decode them. Where did it come from? I asked, unable to tear my gaze away from the hypnotically shifting surface. Officially, a meteorite found in the Mojave Desert in 1947. She paused significantly. Unofficially, we're not sure. It simply appeared. That night, I had my first nightmare. I was floating in a black void while voices whispered in a language I didn't know, yet oddly understood. The words were impossible to pronounce with a human mouth, but their meanings pierced directly into my mind. They spoke of spaces between dimensions, of overlapping realities, of beings that existed simultaneously on multiple planes of existence, and of hunger. A cosmic hunger, vast and patient. I woke up sweating cold, with a complex equation on the tip of my tongue. I jotted it down compulsively in the notebook next to my bed without understanding its meaning. The symbols seemed to twist, under my gaze, as if reluctant to remain fixed on the paper. The next morning, when I showed it to Chen, she merely smiled that empty smile and said, "It's starting." "What's starting?" I insisted, a knot of anxiety forming in my stomach. "The Geo tuning," she replied, sealing my note into an envelope. "Your brain is beginning to process the information from the object. That's why you were selected, Dr. Santos. Your neural patterns are compatible." The following weeks became a feverish routine. Days spent analyzing the patterns emitted by the object. Nights disturbed by increasingly vivid dreams. The nightmares evolved, becoming more detailed, more coherent. I visited impossible cities with architectures defying gravity, where beings with incomprehensible anatomies performed rituals under skies with multiple black suns. In each dream, I understood a bit more of the alien language, and each understanding brought with it a new horror. The realization that something fundamental in the universe was wrong, distorted, corrupted. I met the rest of the team. Dr. Patel, an Indian neuroscientist with a nervous tic in his left eye. Dr. Nakamura, a Japanese theoretical physicist who constantly murmured to herself. Dr. Alvarez, a Colombian linguistics expert with a peculiar scar on his temple. And Dr. Keller, an American whose field of expertise was never clearly explained. They all seemed simultaneously brilliant and displaced, as if something essential had been altered in them. At meals, I noticed that each had strange eating habits. Patel ate only white foods, arranged in precise geometric patterns on his plate. Nakamura chewed exactly 33 times before swallowing, counting softly in Japanese. Alvarez ate nothing solid, only green-colored nutritional drinks, and Keller simply sat with us without eating, observing with clinical interest that made me lose my appetite. It was Alvarez who first mentioned the other groups. We were in the cafeteria, supposedly free of surveillance, though no one really believed that. Cameras were visible in every corner, but Alvarez had discovered a blind spot near the coffee machine. It was there he cornered me, feigning casual conversation about the non-existent weather kilometers below the surface. "Do you think we're the first?" he asked quietly, his eyes constantly checking the cameras. There was something desperate in his gaze, like a trapped animal. "There have been at least 3 teams before us. No one knows what happened to them." "Transferred," interrupted Keller, suddenly appearing beside us like a shadow materializing. He never made a sound approaching, which was disturbing, considering the metal floor that normally echoed every step. "Just transferred to other projects." His fixed stare at Alvarez communicated a clear warning. There was something predatory in the way he positioned himself, slightly leaning forward, as if ready to attack. After that, Alvarez avoided talking to me for days. When he finally approached me again, he seemed different. Calmer, more compliant. The desperation in his eyes had been replaced by an empty acceptance that was even more disturbing. I began noticing patterns beyond those emitted by the object. The frequent rotation of guards, always in intervals of exactly 12 hours. The cameras that occasionally turned away from certain areas at specific times of the day. The lower levels of the facility, which we had no access to, but whose doors occasionally opened, releasing gusts of even colder air, and a smell reminiscent of ozone and something organic decaying. The conversations that ceased when I entered a room, followed by meaningful glances among my colleagues, and most disturbingly, the subtle changes in my colleagues. Patel developed a nervous twitch, a repetitive finger movement that seemed to follow a complex mathematical sequence. Fibonacci distorted, I realized after several days of observation. Nakamura started talking to herself in Japanese, murmuring equations that, when I secretly noted and translated, described impossible geometries in higher dimensional spaces. Chen spent hours staring at the object without blinking, her body completely still except for increasingly slow breathing, as if entering a hibernation state. And Alvarez simply disappeared on the 32nd day. Transferred was the official explanation. No one questioned it. No one mentioned his name again, as if he had never existed. But the night after his disappearance, I heard sounds coming from the main lab. Sounds that weren't human, a kind of wet chirping reverberating through the metal walls. And for a moment, before the door closed, I thought I saw something wearing Alvarez's lab coat, but definitely wasn't Alvarez anymore. That's when I started keeping this journal, hidden in an encryption algorithm of my own creation, disguised as routine analyses. If you're reading this, it means you found a way to decrypt it. Or perhaps you're me, trying to remember who I was before everything changed, before I began losing parts of myself, replaced by something other, because I was changing. Small things at first. I discovered I could work for 20 hours straight without fatigue. My peripheral vision expanded, allowing me to perceive motion at nearly 180 degrees. I began hearing frequencies beyond the normal human spectrum, the hum of electrical systems, the almost subliminal whisper of ventilation ducts, and something more, something coming from the walls, from the floor, as if the facility itself were alive and murmuring. My dreams became more vivid, more real than reality. In them, I walked through vast alien cities under impossible skies, conversed with beings existing simultaneously in multiple dimensions, learned secrets no human mind should ever know, and increasingly, I wasn't a visitor in these dreams, but a resident. As if part of me had always belonged to those impossible places. On the 40th day, I made a discovery. The object's patterns weren't random or incomprehensible. They were a language. Not an alien language as we speculated, but a more fundamental form of communication. The object was speaking directly to our subconscious, completely bypassing our conscious cognitive processes. The equations that appeared in my dreams were translations created by my brain to make sense of what it was receiving. But it wasn't just communication, it was reprogramming. The object wasn't only talking to us, it was rewriting us, altering our perception, our biology, our very definition of reality. And the most terrifying part, it was working. When I presented my theory to Chen, she didn't seem surprised. She just nodded slowly, her eyes fixed on mine with an intensity that seemed to pierce my soul. "Phase 2, then," she said, her voice oddly distant, as if it came from very far away, even though she was only a few centimeters from me. That night, I dreamed about Chen. She was in a room I had never seen before, much deeper than our current laboratory. Her body was partially disassembled, opened like an obscene flower, revealing that inside she was no longer human. Instead of organs, there were pulsating crystalline structures that vaguely resembled the surface of the object. And she smiled at me, that same smile that never reached her eyes as she said, "Soon you too." The next day, I was transferred to Level 5. I had never known of the existence of Level 5 until I received my new credentials. The elevator descended for longer than seemed possible, the pressure in my ears becoming almost painful. When the Doors opened. I was no longer in a sterile laboratory, but in a vast space carved directly out of rock. The air was even colder here, and filled with a smell that reminded me of ozone, metal, and something organic I couldn't identify. In the center of this immense space, a much larger version of the object pulsed with light of its own. It was no longer black with iridescence, but something that seemed to constantly change, not just color, but shape, dimension, and even position in space, as if it existed simultaneously in multiple places. Looking directly at it caused sharp pain behind the eyes, and a dizzying sensation that turned my stomach. And around it, at circular workstations, dozens of people worked in absolute silence, all connected by wires to helmets covering their eyes. Their movements were disturbingly synchronized, as if they were parts of a single organism. Some had dark spots visible on exposed skin, fractal patterns reminiscent of the original object's surface. "Welcome to Project Echo," said a voice behind me. I turned to find a man I'd never seen before. Tall, gray hair, perfectly calm-combed, impeccable suit despite the underground heat. His skin had a waxy quality, as if he were an extremely well-made replica of a human being, but not quite real. "I am Director Weiss. Your contribution has been remarkable, Dr. Santos." "What is this?" I asked, gesturing toward the silent workers, trying to ignore the way their fingers moved in perfect unison across keyboards. "Direct interface," he replied with a clinical smile devoid of teeth. "Why translate when we can experience directly? These volunteers are in constant communication with the artifact." "Artifact? I thought it was called the object." "The object is just a fragment. This is the complete artifact. Recovered in 1947, but only recently activated." There was something in the way he said activated that sent a chill down my spine, as if the word carried a meaning far more sinister than its common definition. Roswell. The thought arose involuntarily. The famous UFO incident always treated as conspiracy or mass hysteria. Weiss seemed to read my mind, his smile widening unsettlingly. "A convenient myth. The truth is much more interesting. The artifact didn't come from space, Dr. Santos. It came from another place. Another plane of existence." He made a sweeping gesture with his hand. "What you see here is just the tip of the iceberg, so to speak. The part that can exist in our three-dimensional reality. The rest extends into other places." "What places?" I asked, my mouth suddenly dry. "Places the human mind wasn't designed to comprehend. Dimensions where the laws of physics we know are mere suggestions. Realities, where time flows in multiple directions simultaneously." He stepped closer, lowering his voice as if sharing a precious secret. "But we are evolving, Dr. Santos. We are adapting. With the artifact's help, we are becoming capable of perceiving and existing in those other planes." In the following days, I was integrated into the Level 5 team. I received my own interface helmet, although initially only for short, monitored sessions. The first connection was indescribable. No words in any human language can explain the feeling of having your consciousness expanded beyond the confines of your skull, of feeling thoughts that aren't yours flowing through your mind like an alien river. I saw things. Impossible geometries folding in on themselves at angles that shouldn't exist. Creatures existing simultaneously in multiple dimensions, their bodies extending infinitely in directions my eyes couldn't follow. Cities built at angles that violated the laws of physics, where gravity operated in multiple directions and time moved in spirals instead of straight lines. And behind it all, a vast, ancient presence, observing through countless eyes never meant to exist in our universe. A consciousness so far beyond human comprehension, as ours surpasses that of a bacterium. And that consciousness was aware of me, studying me, tasting me. When the session ended, I vomited for 20 minutes straight. My nose bled, my eyes burned as if exposed to acid, and my ears buzzed with impossible frequencies. Weiss simply observed with clinical interest, taking notes on a tablet with symbols from no human alphabet I recognized. "Incredible," he murmured. "Most don't retain sanity after first contact." That's when I realized We weren't scientists studying an artifact. We were test subjects in a much grander experiment. We weren't decoding an alien language. We were being decoded by something that viewed humanity as little more than an interesting set of proteins to be remade. I began investigating during my few free hours. I hacked terminals, copied files, listened to conversations. I found records of earlier experiments dating back decades. Photos of volunteers with hollow eyes and fixed smiles, their bodies gradually transformed by dark spots spreading like geometric infections. Clinical reports detailing unexplained physiological transformations, internal organs reconfigured into structures with no known biological function, brains developing new lobes, skin turning translucent and revealing luminescent patterns beneath, and most disturbingly, evidence that the artifact was growing, not just physically, but in influence. Its energy signature, whatever metric they used, was expanding exponentially, reaching beyond the facility, beyond the desert, potentially beyond the continent. Like ripples in a lake, but ripples that altered the very nature of reality wherever they passed. On my 60th day in the facility, I noticed the first change in myself. A dark spot on the palm of my right hand, with a pattern vaguely resembling the artifact's surface. It wasn't a superficial discoloration, but something that seemed to come from within, as if my own biology was being rewritten cell by cell. I tried reporting it to the medical team, but when I arrived at the infirmary, Dr. Chen was there, and somehow I knew I shouldn't show her. There was something in her eyes, an awareness, an expectation, that told me she already knew, that she was waiting for it. Instead, I invented a headache. She examined me with those unblinking eyes for just the right amount of time. Her cold fingers against my temple sending shivers of revulsion down my spine. "You're hearing it, aren't you?" she suddenly asked, her voice containing strange harmonics that seemed to vibrate directly in my bones. "Hearing what?" I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. The voices, the whispers when you're alone, the calls. Her gaze locked onto mine, and for a moment I thought I saw something move behind her irises, something that didn't belong in a human body. I hesitated too long. She smiled, emotion disconnected from the rest of her face, as if her skin were merely a poorly fitted mask over something completely different. It's normal. It's how it communicates, how it prepares us. Prepares us for what? The question escaped before I could stop it. She leaned in closer, her breath strangely metallic, like copper and ozone. For the convergence. That night, the spot on my hand grew, spreading up my wrist in fractal patterns that seemed to subtly move when not observed directly. And I started to hear it. Not exactly voices, but a constant buzzing at the edge of my perception, like radio static forming nearly recognizable words in a language I'd never learned, yet instinctively understood. They spoke of transformation, of transcendence, of a world where the limitations of human biology would be overcome, where consciousness would exist freely beyond the constraints of three-dimensional matter, where time would simply be another dimension to navigate at will. And the most terrifying part of me longed for it, desired this liberation from human limitations, wanted to experience this expanded existence promised by the whispers. The next day, I discovered my access to Level 5 had been revoked. Temporarily, Weiss explained when I confronted him, his face a mask of professional concern. "We need to adjust some parameters. Your brain readings are interesting." But his eyes told another story. They knew I was investigating. Maybe they knew about this diary. Perhaps they knew about my growing doubts, my fear, my determination to expose what was happening. That's when I decided to escape, not just from the facility, but with proof. The world needed to know what was happening deep inside Area 51, what we were awakening, what we were becoming. I planned carefully. I observed security patterns, identified weaknesses, prepared for the right moment. I built an improvised storage device using components diverted from the lab, hidden inside an ordinary object unlikely to raise suspicion. A pill bottle for headaches prescribed after my sessions with the interface helmet. Meanwhile, the mark continued to spread, climbing up my arm in fractal patterns that seemed to glow under certain lighting conditions. The whispers became clearer, more insistent. Sometimes I woke speaking a language I'd never learned, reciting equations describing impossible geometries in higher dimensional spaces, and I began having memory lapses, entire hours disappearing, during which, according to security records, I kept working normally, except it wasn't me. Or at least, not the version of me still clinging to his humanity. My chance came on day 78, a fire alarm on level 2, which I triggered remotely through a vulnerability in the system I discovered, created enough chaos to allow me access to the server room. I had exactly 6 minutes before backup systems kicked in. I connected my device and began transferring everything I could, reports, videos, experimental records. That's when I saw the file labeled Convergence Final Protocol. I couldn't resist. I opened it. It was a video. It showed a circular room I recognized as deeper than level 5, probably the mythical level 6 whispered among older technicians. In the center, what appeared to be an even larger version of the artifact pulsed with black light that somehow illuminated and obscured simultaneously. Its form changed constantly, as if breathing. But each breath altered its geometry in ways that made my eyes ache trying to follow. Around it, dozens of people, not entirely people anymore, were arranged in concentric circles. Their bodies had been altered, fused with unknown technology that looked simultaneously mechanical and organic. Their skins covered with the same fractal marks now decorating my entire arm. Their eyes replaced by glowing orbs pulsing in sync with the artifact. Then, the artifact began to open like an obscene flower, revealing a void that wasn't darkness, but the complete absence of reality. A hole not just in space, but in existence itself. And through it, something began to emerge. Something vast and impossible, with geometries that made my eyes hurt and my brain scream in protest. Tentacles that weren't tentacles, but multidimensional projections of a being primarily existing in planes beyond our perception. Eyes that weren't eyes, but sensory organs perceiving aspects of reality humans were never meant to understand. The video ended abruptly, with a final frame showing Weiss's face in almost religious ecstasy as the creature fully emerged. The file date was 3 weeks in the future. It wasn't a record. It was a forecast. A plan. I finished downloading and was about to leave when the door opened. It was Chen, but not the Chen I knew. Part of her face was now covered with the fractal marks, and one of her eyes had been replaced with something glowing with the same alien light as the artifact. Her posture was strange, as if her body were being operated by something not entirely familiar with human anatomy. "You don't understand, Miguel," she said, her voice overlaid with a metallic echo seemingly coming not from her throat, but somewhere inside her chest. "We're not summoning something. We're becoming something. The next step in evolution." "That's not evolution," I replied, stepping back until I felt the cold wall against my back. "It's extinction." "Extinction?" She laughed, a sound reverberating impossibly, as if produced in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "No. Transcendence. You're already part of it. Look at yourself." I looked down and saw with horror that the marks now covered my chest, climbing up my neck, and worse. I could feel them moving under my skin, reorganizing something fundamental in my biology. Small bumps formed and disappeared, as if something were testing new configurations for my body. "It's too late to resist," Chen continued, advancing with movements slightly disjointed. "You were chosen. We all were. To be the heralds of the new reality." Her hand, now with 6 fingers, I realized in horror, extended toward me. And for a terrible moment I felt the urge to accept it. To surrender to the transformation. To embrace whatever was making me into something else. I don't remember exactly what happened next. I recall fighting, somehow managing to get past Chen. I remember running through corridors as alarms blared, using my knowledge of security systems to reach the surface. The searing heat of the Nevada desert as I ran aimlessly. The caustic sun, shocking after months in refrigerated underground darkness. I remember helicopters overhead, amplified voices ordering me to stop. A sharp pain in my back. A tranquilizer dart, I assume. And then, darkness. I woke up in a state psychiatric hospital. Apparently, I had been found wandering the desert, dehydrated, delirious, speaking in unknown languages, and with extensive self-mutilations. The marks I had tried to tear from my own skin using sharp rocks I found in the desert. There was no evidence of my time at Area 51. My employment record showed that I had taken a medical leave from the university for nervous breakdown. The device containing the downloaded files was gone. The doctors diagnosed paranoid schizophrenia with elaborate delusions. They said I had created an entire alternate reality to escape some unprocessed trauma. That Area 51, the artifact, the convergence, everything, had been a product of my sick mind. Julia visited me once. Her eyes were red from crying, and she couldn't maintain eye contact with me throughout the visit. "The doctors say you just need time," she said, her voice trembling. "With medication and therapy, you can get better." But there was fear in her voice. Fear of me, of what I had become. She never came back. I almost believed them, almost accepted that I had gone mad. It would have been easier, more comfortable. The alternative, that everything I experienced was real, that something alien was gradually taking control of my body and mind, that an entity from another plane of existence was about to emerge into our world, was simply unbearable. Until I noticed one of the nurses watching me when he thought I wasn't looking. The way his eyes never blinked for the right amount of time. How he always seemed to be present during my therapy sessions, even when he wasn't scheduled. How he occasionally tilted his head, as if listening to something no one else could hear. And once, when he rolled up his sleeve to give me an injection, I saw the beginning of a fractal pattern on his wrist, identical to the one that had started, appearing on me in the facility. They are watching me, waiting. Maybe waiting for me to become like them, for the transformation initiated by the artifact to complete itself even from a distance. Or perhaps just making sure I remain discredited, confined, silenced. But I managed to create this record. I found ways to bypass surveillance, to encode my story in seemingly harmless files, therapy notes, journals recommended by doctors as part of treatment, drawings that look like meaningless scribbles but contain encoded information within their patterns. If you're reading this, it means somehow it escaped them. Or maybe you're one of them now, studying the process of resistance to improve future protocols. The marks continue to spread. Now they cover 70% of my body. I had to bribe one of the patients to get long-sleeved clothes so the doctors wouldn't see the extent of the transformation. The whispers are constant now, an alien symphony that never ceases, even when I take the medications meant to silence all voices in my head. Sometimes I see through eyes that aren't mine, glimpses of laboratories, of the desert, of distant cities where other people with similar marks walk unnoticed among the population. I see meetings in boardrooms where executives with hidden marks under expensive suits make decisions subtly preparing the world for what is coming. I see politicians, generals, religious leaders, all with the same vacant stare and hidden marks beneath their clothing. The infection, if I can even call it that, is spreading, not just in me but across the world, silent, patient, inexorable. The date of the convergence is approaching. 3 days, according to my calculations. I don't know if it's still possible to stop it. I don't know if there's still a me, separate from what I'm becoming to try. Last night, I dreamed I was back at the deepest level of the facility, before the fully open artifact. But this time, I didn't feel fear. I felt anticipation, as if something that had always been missing in me was finally about to be filled, as if my entire human life had only been a preliminary stage. A cocoon from which I was about to emerge into something far greater and incomprehensible. I woke up crying. Not from terror, but from a strange and disturbing joy. A feeling of purpose and belonging I had never experienced as a human. And this morning, when I looked in the mirror, I saw that my eyes had begun to change. My right iris now pulses with a subtle light that is not of this world. And when I look through that eye, I see more. Layers of reality that were always there, but that human eyes were never designed to perceive. Patterns in the air revealing currents of probability and potentiality. Trails of light showing where objects have been and where they will be. The flow of time as a multidimensional river that can be navigated in any direction. I'm running out of time. Out of myself. If you're reading this and you're still human, still yourself, there's something you must understand. What's happening at Area 51 isn't an invasion in the traditional sense. It's not an external force conquering our world. It's our reality being rewritten from within. It's the very nature of existence being reprogrammed. And the most terrifying part of me longs for it, desires it, sees beauty in the dissolution of individuality, in merging with something vast and incomprehensible, like a drop of water yearning to return to the ocean. Yesterday, a new doctor came to visit me. He introduced himself as Dr. Weiss, the same Weiss from the facility. He smiled when he saw my recognition, that same clinical smile that never reached his eyes. Incredible, he said, exactly as before. Most don't retain so much of their original identity at this stage. What did you do to me? I asked, my voice sounding strange to my own ears, as if my vocal cords were reconfiguring to produce sounds not meant for human throats. Nothing you hadn't agreed to become, he replied, sitting down in the chair beside my bed with a fluid grace that seemed slightly wrong, as if his body operated under a different set of physical laws. You're a pioneer, Dr. Santos. One of the first to undergo full transition while maintaining enough cognitive faculties to document the process. Transition to what? His smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed oddly numerous and slightly translucent, as if made of some crystalline material instead of enamel and dentin. To the future. To what comes after humanity. He stood to leave, but paused at the door. Oh, and don't worry about your little coded diary. It's quite educational for us. Helps fine-tune the process for the next subjects. So they know. They always have. This record was never a cry for help, but just another experiment. More data for their analysis. More information to refine the transformation process for the next subjects. Still, I keep writing. Perhaps because it's the last thing that still feels human about me. The need to tell a story. To be remembered. To leave some trace of who I was before the transformation is complete. Before Miguel Santos disappears entirely. Replaced by whatever I am becoming. The date of the convergence is tomorrow. The marks now cover my entire body. When I look at my hands, I see fractal patterns pulsing with their own light, reorganizing my flesh into configurations that serve purposes my mind doesn't yet fully understand. The whispers have become a constant symphony. I see through hundreds of eyes simultaneously, others like me, scattered around the world, all preparing. Executives, politicians, scientists, soldiers, ordinary people, all connected, all part of the same network, all transforming. And the strangest part, I no longer feel fear, only serene acceptance. As if I were finally waking up from a long dream called humanity. As if my entire previous existence had merely been a prelude to what is to come. This will be my final entry. Miguel Santos already barely exists. What I'm becoming has no need for records, stories, or a past. It exists in an eternal present encompassing all possibilities simultaneously. If any humanity remains reading this after the convergence, I'm sorry. We weren't strong enough to resist. Or perhaps this was always our purpose. Not the conquerors of the universe we imagined ourselves to be, but merely a transitional stage, a cocoon for something far vaster and incomprehensible. The whispers say it's time. The artifact is fully open. The barrier between worlds is dissolving. Can see beyond the veil now. I can see what waits on the other side. It is not the end. It is only the echo of the abyss answering our call at last.